All right, let's start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rucha Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is Except You Utter by the Tongue, Words Easy to Be Understood. And that's taken directly from 1 Corinthians chapter 14, which we're going to get into that. I was watching a video the elder Apostle Tara just did a debate that Hakai had with some individual that claimed to be from One West, which he's not. Pretty much when you listen to them, it was just like a bunch of just confusion, to the point where Elder Apostle Tara was getting pissed off. He was about to just end, the lesson, because it was all over the place, and when you teach, this is why the Apostle Paul said, use words easy to be understood. We're out here teaching the gospel of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai. We're not out here trying to debate manuscripts and trying to debate, anything else except for things that will lead to our salvation. And one of the things that will lead to our salvation is, the prophecy. And that's why we touch on prophecy heavy, because prophecy is showing that we're getting closer and closer to the end. Hebrews 6:9 says, but beloved, we are persuaded better things of you, and things that accompany salvation, though we thus speak. So pretty much the things that we should be speaking about are things that accompany salvation, like the, prophecy of the MOTB being the micro CHIP, World War III that's ramping up, the situations, with the land of Israel and the people of Israel going hard against Syria and Iran, and just getting everything stirred up as the prophecy stated they would, so on and so forth. These are things that we should be speaking about. And when you speak about these things, you're supposed to be concise. You're supposed to just be direct. You're not supposed to try to sound like some eloquent orator. You're supposed to just come straight out and tell them what it is, and that's it. The Apostle Paul said, though I be rude in speech, yet not in knowledge. And all of this is captured in 1 Corinthians, the 14th chapter. And I wanted to highlight some verses in here, and then, just end it there. You can go to the latest video the Elder Pastor just did. It was dealing with, Genesis, Hakkah, with, against some individual, and it was so confusing. It was just like you didn't know what the hell, they were talking about. It was just like all over the place. All right. So this is 1 Corinthians 14:6. Now, brethren, if I come unto you speaking with tongues, and this tongues is talking about other languages, what shall I profit you, except I shall speak to you either by revelation or by knowledge or by prophesying or by doctrine? And these are things we should be doing. Revelation, knowledge, prophesying, doctrine. Sound doctrine, because you have a lot of individuals out there that take little pieces and bits and parts from the One West, men that have been teaching and adding their own bullshit to it. And the Lord's going to put a stop to that eventually, because you're going to have a lot of false prophets, especially the closer we get to the end, that the time when Jake fell back during, just before 70 AD, there was a very heavy spirit of apostasy that was out there. A lot of defectors from their faith, a lot of individuals talking crap about the faith. Some were a part of it at one time, turned against it. Others were just always against it, speaking against it, until the Lord brought that devastation, that destruction by the Roman soldiers, against Israel in 70 AD. You see? And we're fast approaching 70 AD, on steroids. All right. This is going to make 70 AD, take a back seat, so to speak, because it's going to be a time there's never been a time like this ever before. And that time during the time of 70 AD was a very devastating time for Jake back then. Jake was catching supernatural hell back then from the Romans. And it was the Lord that was with him, because they had provisions, they had, they were dug in, they were good for a minute. even at Masada. But eventually the Romans got in there. Why? Because the Lord had already prophesied that Jake was going to go down. And prior to the Apostle Paul, going back in the spirit world, he spoke about that. He said, except there come a falling away first. And you got brothers today, to this day, that break that scripture down in 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter, down wrong. When they'll say that that's talk about now, the falling away. No, that happened 70 AD. And that's when the man of sin was revealed. Yahweh Shai said, when you see the abomination that maketh desolate stand in the holy place, pretty much know that the end is near. I'm just merely paraphrasing what the Lord said. And sure enough, once you saw the siege against Jerusalem back during the first Jewish-Roman War, or Israelite-Roman War back in 66 AD, somewhere roughly around the middle of it, that started the siege of Jerusalem. You see, and there was a lot of revolts and rebellions going on back then, and it took years for them to eventually conquer Jerusalem. But the Lord said that they would do it, and He said that it would be the Romans that would do it. And guess what? Jake eventually fell. So we've getting closer and closer to the destruction of this place, and pretty much the time of Jacob's trouble in this time is going to be something that has never been seen before. It's going to be unprecedented, right? It says, and even things without life giving sound, whether pipe or harp, right? So if you have a pipe, if you have a harp, if you have no guitar or any string instrument, you had any brass instruments, if you didn't know how to play it correctly, it's just going to be noise. It's going to be like, come on, stop that. Blowing that thing, inside joke. Except they give a distinction in the sounds. See? How shall it be known what is piped or harp? Right. So if you pick up an instrument and you're not playing a song that people are familiar with, if you're not, making the instrument sound good, nobody's going to know what the hell you're playing. What the hell is that? And that's how it is when you guys get out there and you start using these big, theological, words and, trying to sound like scholars and, instead of just going down to the bare, basic, minimal and just speak regular, But no, that's not good enough, because that's, what attracts Jake. When they see that Jake, in the Black conscious community, like back in the days when Polite was on the scene before he got locked up, all of them fancy words and the fancy talk and all of these big words, Jake gets amazed by that. That's what they like. But what is the message that you're trying to convey? Because most Jakes don't talk like that. They don't know what the hell you're talking about. Certain Jakes got to pull out dictionaries to break down what you said. Now, in the case of Great Millstone, we every once in a while we use big words, but we'll tell you what it means, or we may even look it up within the lesson, or we'll tell you to go look it up. But for the most part, when you listen to these lessons, it's just basic, easy to be understood, pretty much romper room level breakdowns. To the point where it's easy to be understood, and you still have those that won't get it, but that's all right. But the point is to use words easy to be understood. For if the trumpet give an uncertain sound, who shall prepare himself to the battle? Right. So you're sounding the trumpet, but you're not giving them the warning. It's just like a guy that's on the tower blowing the trumpet, but he's not giving he's given an uncertain sound. Like it said, when you look up this word uncertain, right? Uncertain sound. Phone, where you get the word phono. The word is adelos. This is for uncertain. Not manifest, indistinct, uncertain, obscure. Right. So you're giving them a dark understanding. They're already in darkness, and you're giving them more darkness. You're not, leading them to the light. All right. So let's read that again. So it says, for if the trumpet give an uncertain sound, who shall prepare himself to the battle? So likewise ye, except you utter by the tongue words easy to be understood, how shall it be known what is spoken? For you shall speak into the air. Yeah, and you're not, and people are not, they're gonna miss the message because you are all over the place, and you're giving a breakdown without understanding. Because you're straying away from the understanding of what was given to you. Let me see. I was looking for except here. It's easy to be understood right here. Eusemos, right? Eusemos, well marked, clear and definite, distinct, right? Given a distinct sound, something that's easy to be understood. People don't, the majority of Jake don't speak like these scholars speak. You see, the Lord stripped that spirit from Jake. All right, words easy to be understood. So likewise, ye, except you utter by the tongue words easy to be understood, how shall it be known what is spoken? For you shall speak into the air. You shall speak into the air, right? So you're pretty much not going to edify anybody. The point of teaching this word is to edify. What does the word edify mean? The word edify means to bring out, understanding and to build, Jake out there that are potential part of the elect with the building blocks of the scriptures so that they can grow. And the reason for them to grow is so that they could eventually become teachers, because once you get to a certain level and you learn a certain amount from the teachers, then Yahweh Shai comes himself, Yahweh Bashem Shai will sup with you individually because you got past the stage of the milk, you don't need to have your diapers changed. You came to a certain level of understanding, then the spirit takes over. You get, you still every once in a while you might still have questions and you might still have to go to your teacher and ask certain questions, but for the most part, you have a very good grounded understanding of the truth, and you can, the Lord can use your vessel directly, without having to have someone hold your hand. And that's the purpose. Did not the Apostle Paul tell Timothy to teach men? But when you teach them, make sure that you're going to teach men that are able to teach others also. The Lord is not looking for followers. The Lord is looking for, he's looking for teachers. What was one of the things that Yahweh Shai told the disciples? He told them, didn't he tell them, the harvest is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray therefore the husbandman that he's sending forth laborers into his vineyard, and that's what we're supposed to do out there in the field teaching. So you're not in here, especially men. You men are not in here to just be spectators, be cheerleaders. You're here to learn so that you can in turn teach. You're learning from your teachers so that you can be a teacher and know how to correctly break the scriptures down. You see? So let me see. I had some other verses clicked, but when I went to go check out the definitions or the Greek words, I kind of lost them. So just bear with me 1 second. But if not, then I'll just jump down to the main point. We're not children understanding. This is a heavy point too, but that goes into something else. This is verse 22. Wherefore tongues are for signs, speaking in different languages, not to them that just like the instance that took place during the time of Pentecost, when the apostles, at that time they were apostles, they were speaking in different tongues, different, languages that those other Israelites that were coming there, were born speaking. Not to them that believe, but to them that believe not. Right. But prophesying, which is breaking these scriptures down properly, serveth not for them that believe not, but for them which believe. Why? Because it's a means to help you grow and to maintain a healthy, sound doctrine environment. Because a lot of jakes are not, maintaining. They're you see a lot of fallaways, a lot of fallouts, a lot of castaways. You're seeing it ramping up. Bugged out individuals that prophesied, against the apostles, that talk shit about the apostles and the bishops and the elders and brothers in Great Millstone, and now they totally bugged out. Talking about that this individual is King David and that individual is Joab, and this other individual that was saying that he's supposed to be the Most High, and and then this other individual, he no longer follows the Hebrew Israelites, and saying that vocab is more into the scriptures than we are. I mean, just all kinds of fucking madness going on. But this is letting you know, this is another sign to let us know that we're getting closer and closer to the end, because more and more apostates and more false doctrines are being made manifest. Because you got to remember, a lot of this shit is going on the ground, but the Lord is making them surface. And then it's making it surface so that, we can get on it, jump on it, of course, but also for the purpose of, fulfilling prophecy. Because the scriptures speak about, these things happening. There's going to be a lot of false prophets rising up. And it said, even among you there shall be false teachers that shall raise up, and lead some astray. All right. Into one place, speak in tongues. Verse 26. How is it then, brethren, when you come together, every one of you hath a psalm, hath a doctrine, hath a tongue, hath a revelation, hath an interpretation. Let all things be done unto edifying, unto, making this thing to grow, to build. Here it is. You're on the platform, you're speaking, but then this guy is telling you his opinions and he cutting you off, and you allowing it. Talking about Hakah, whatever his priest Hakah, whatever his new title is. All right. There's a lot of good meat in here, but I just want to go straight to the point. Verse 32. I started 33. For the Most High is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches of the saints. Right. Because when you come with that, with that so-called theological terms and speeches and trying to speak like these scholars, pretty much that's confusion. That's what Esau does. Esau is a master at circumlocution, speaking in circles. And they use big words because they know most jakes are not, familiar with a lot of these different words and their definitions. So they captivate you with these big words. That's why the Apostle Paul said, look, when I spoke to you, I didn't use these fancy terms, this wisdom of men's speech. I just came to you directly, I just spoke to you directly, not in a confusing way. I didn't throw stuff at you to have you all confused. I spoke directly and plain to you. And that's how we're supposed to speak. Plain. So it says, for the Most High is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches of the saints. So let's look up this word confusion. The word there is akatasia. Akatasia, which is instability. See? A state of disorder, disturbance, confusion. So we're not supposed to be speaking in a confused state. Why? Because that causes, as I said, the root word is unstable. It causes instability. It doesn't cause you to build, a sure foundation in Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. And that's another thing with these guys. The names of the Lord, slowly but surely, are just, leaking out. every once in a while they'll use the name of the Lord, but mostly it's Jesus and Christ, and so like it, disorder, commotion, tumult. So going back, so it says, for the Most High is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches of the saints. Now we're going to jump down to the 40th verse. Let all things be done decently and in order. There's an order to everything. In verse 38, but if any man be ignorant, let him be ignorant. And that's the point. So if you have an individual that can't get it, you got to move on. You got to walk away. You're not Yahweh Shai. You're not Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. Yahweh Shai is the Savior, not you. Some of you guys are trying to take on the mantle of the Savior. You're going to save it. You're just going to make it your mission to save all Israel. And that's not the plans of the Most High, Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai. So it says, but if any man be ignorant, let him be ignorant. Wherefore, brethren, covet to prophesy and forbid not to speak with tongues. So you could speak at the different languages, but the main thing is what? Prophecy. And that's what we speak. And the spirit of Yahweh Shai is the spirit of prophecy. And we're supposed to speak about these things because we're supposed to speak about things that accompany salvation. And prophecy is a part of salvation. Because by the prophecies is how we know what time period we're living in. Yahweh Shai said that when the disciples asked him, he said, when you see this and you see this sign and you see that sign and wars and rumors of wars and all this stuff, then you know that the end is near. And then he went on to break it down even further. So when we speak, we're supposed to use words easy to be understood. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. I pray that this lesson was edifying. I hope I didn't lose anybody. And with that, shalom to the elect.